So I was wondering if you all could talk about your role in the saxophone section and kind of what you're thinking about in terms of following Dave and so on.
Well, that's a good question, an important one. So I'm playing the first part. I'm playing lead alto, so that's generally the top part. Well, there is an exception in this band where the lead is in the tenor, but for the most part, lead is in first alto. So that's the top note. So my responsibility is to lay down the conception very clearly, first off, and to interpret the music. This music is jazz music is open to a lot of interpretation. I mean, if you were to transcribe anybody's solo or take any of this music and have a trained classical musician play it, they'd play every note correctly and it wouldn't sound anything like what we do. So there's a lot of interpretation involved. That's why the history is so important. So I'm trying to interpret the music, and I'm trying to also be very clear about where I'm cutting things off, when I'm scooping, and do things consistently, so it gives the rest of the section a chance to blend with me and balance. So dynamics, inflections, vibrato, articulations, cutoffs, falls, scoops, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I'm playing alto too, and one thing I think about a lot is making sure that I can always hear the lead. Now, we have a really great lead, and he really projects, so that's not usually an issue, but I want to make sure that my voice is under his voice and supportive. So all of the stylistic things that he's doing, I'm trying to mimic those. All of the intonation characteristics, I'm trying to impersonate those also. Completely a supportive role, playing alto too.
Yeah, one of the things I really loved about the Count Basie saxophone section is I played with Benny Goodman's last band, and he used to have this thing where he'd have the saxophones played by ourselves, and then he would try to figure out who had the best clarinet reed, and while we were playing a solo, he'd come and steal the reed off your clarinet. But the difference between playing the Benny Goodman saxophone section, he really liked things light. We used to do a lot of Fletcher Henderson stuff and very hard technical stuff, but you never really got to roar, you know what I mean? And in this section, when I first played, when I first started playing with Frank West's band with Marshall Royal and those guys, you could play soft and then you could roar. And I really love that. I like to fill up the horn. The other thing that after playing for so many years in this band with Johnny Williams and I used to always have this thing, if we had to hear each other. He was the baritone sax player. If he didn't hear me, if I was messing around with a mouthpiece or something, if he didn't hear me, he'd say, "Hey, man, I can't hear you." He always wanted to hear me on the other end. And when New Blood Josh got on the band, he said, he kind of asked me, and I said, well, where were we, in Japan or something? I said, look, man, why don't you go out and get yourself a hard rubber Berg 115 tip opening and see what happens, I thought he would do that in like 2 months. The next day, he came to the Blue Note, and I could hear him. So I'm not just listening to Dave, I'm always listening to the lead alto player, always. But I also, for this lead tenor chair here and the Barry, I gotta hear that down there. So that's where.
I played solo second tenor. But actually, I say that as half seriously and half in jest, but I realize when I'm in the section and I'm playing my part that it's the second tenor, but I'm the only one that's playing this part. So for me, I play it like it's a solo. I know that every note is important, and there's nobody else that's going to cover anything that I might slough over. So I make sure that I play my part as though it's the lead part, as though it's a solo. But I also realize that I am supporting the lead alto, and I'm underneath him, and my job is to blend with him as well as everybody else in the section. But there's nobody else that's playing my part. I'm always aware of that.
So I'm playing the baritone saxophone, so obviously the lowest saxophone. So my role is to support the whole section, as well as locking with the trombones, because we have a lot of unison parts, especially with bass trombone. And it's really great to play in tune with somebody, you know, it's a real pleasure. But I think I enjoy it, that's not a anyway, my role is to be as in sync as possible with the lead alto, whatever band I'm playing in. Dave is super consistent, so you know it's kind of easy to lock into what he's doing. So I guess my thought process is that I want him to think that he's also playing baritone. You know, that's how locked in. So you know we're so connected that when he plays, my sound comes out, because in these parts there's a lot of unisons, and also you know talk about doing your history and doing your homework and all that stuff. If you look back at you know kind of my favorite big bands, you know, you got Ellington, Dad, Mel, Basie, they all had baritone players that you know had a really soloistic voice. And you could hear them when they're playing section parts. You know, Harry Carney, you can hear him. Pepper, you know, Charlie Folks. You can all hear them. So that's kind of my role. And then when I joined the band, I had a Duke off, I had a metal Duke off, and wasn't cutting it. I thought it was, but it wasn't cutting it. So I got this, and you know, I was hearing it. You know, when I went to school, I got to study with great Dick Oates, and he would say every week, he would say, "Yeah, you gotta play harder. Oh, you know." You gotta go, you know. So that's kind of my goal, to kind of have that bite, that this section, that you know, makes this section the Basie section, kind of accentuate that presence.
Yeah, so that's all. This is one of the best sections I've ever played in, and the thing about the baritone saxophone is as important, if not more important, than the lead alto. It connects with the trombone section, as Josh said, but also many times in the voicings, and you have to listen very carefully to the voicings, because whether you use vibrato or whether you don't depends a lot of times on the voicing. So when you listen to saxophone sections, when you listen to Ellington, when you listen to Basie, when you listen to whatever, Mincer, it doesn't matter, you need to listen for these things, because they're the things that determine what you do. And a lot of times in a lot of music, the baritone is doubled an octave below me. So if we're together, that locks the section right in. And the other thing is, I'm not a czar, okay? And if you're the lead alto, that doesn't make you a czar, okay? And I know that I'm not always right. And I'm always listening to the entire section, because sometimes I hear something Doug does, or I hear something that Doug Miller does, or something that Sean does, and I say, oh yeah, I'm hearing that, and then we blend together, we move together. So it's very important to be humble and think of the whole.
So what we'll do, thank you. So we'll finish up. And since we'll finish it, we'll finish with the saxophone sections. I'm going to put them on the spot and have you guys play something, that thing from Brand X. What is that solo thing, that sax thing on Brand X? It's like behind the solo or something like that. You can figure out what it is. And we'll have them demonstrate one of the, you know, while they're one of the greatest saxophone sections in the world today. I think they're the best, and they're swinging. But you guys have been wonderful, and all you guys are going to be at the show tonight, right?
Yeah.
So very cool. We're going to have Mr. Len Seaton play a number with us, and we're going to have Mr. Bradley as a student. Don't miss that. But thank you guys very, very much, and feel free to stay in touch with us, you know, and talk to us when we leave, and just stay in touch. Because every time a position comes up, the first thing we think, well, who do we know? Who do we know? Well, that kid down at UNT, man, oh, call him. So you never know. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to have these guys play that for you. You know what I'm talking about?
You want to just do the sax?
Yeah, just the saxes, yeah. Since we just,
Me?
yeah, whatever you want. Yeah, whatever you want, yeah. Okay, they're going to do a saxophone solo section from a composition by Frank Foster called Who Me? And
rhythm section, you guys can play rhythm.
Yeah.
So where are you going to start?
2-4-C.
2-4-C. Rhythm section, and then saxophone section. And once again, thank you very much for Carmen Bradford back there. How about it for Carmen? And also, you guys have to meet our longtime manager. She's been with this orchestra now for about 40 years. Miss Dee Askew. She's down here now in front. She makes it all happen. Our CEO, Dee Askew. Carmen's been the woman in show business. Okay, so this is the saxophone section 2-4-C. This is a composition called Who Me, and we're gonna play this tonight too, so you hear it.
You want to do it the way we did it that one time where we play it like kind of regular and then we play it our way?
Oh yeah, you know what? Oh good, so we'll do that. Yeah, we don't want to keep you long, but this is what we're gonna do. They're gonna play it how a typical saxophone section might play it. Just, not the Basie way, not the Basie way. This is just how, if you got a bunch of guys off the street somewhere and they play sax, then they play it like this. 2-4-C. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, This is typical. That's what we'll have to do. That's what you get when you got typical guys playing. You miss a note, can't count rest. Sometimes in this music in our book, sometimes it's not the notes, it's the rest. That's what's messed up. So we're gonna do the same thing again. Now they're gonna play it how they play it. Here we go. Watch the tempo.